The Film Theorist is a YouTube channel that likes to take a really good look at movies and ask a bunch of questions and then completely pull shit out of their ass on them. Now, I take exception to one particular video of film theory, Black Panther's Economic Crisis. Well, you see, the problem is that the people who make this channel don't understand economics for absolute shit. Now, here's the problem. They went on to state mainly that their problem is that Canada is a command economy, and command economies are always bad because these things we just listed. Of course, they don't actually back up anything that they're actually saying with any kind of economic data or historical evidence. They just say, oh, well, it's bad because it's bad. I mean, of the right wing, that's exactly what we would expect. Basically just saying it's bad because bad. So what I'm going to do is take exception to some of the things that they said in the video, which were outright false. Now, it said that, Venezuela is bad because it's a one crop industry that's nationalized by the government. Now, while Venezuela is mostly a one product economy, that of course being oil, not that much of it is actually nationalized. You see, this is something that they've made up. They've just said, the entire oil industry is held by Venezuela, held by the Venezuelan government. Well, you see, the problem is this isn't true. Actually, the vast majority of it is still privately owned, and that's one of the problems. Perhaps if they had bothered to do any research, they would have remembered an event called the Bosses Strike, where the bosses came in and locked up much of the oil infrastructure, refusing to allow workers to go in and work. That's just one example. But they didn't bother doing any of that research because they're completely dishonest. The market and private ownership still account for about 75% of the economy. In fact, this would be my criticism of them, allowing this to be the case and allowing these large companies to end up sabotaging the country. It's interesting how these companies say, we have no money to run. We're going out of business. We have to lock the doors. And then the Venezuelan government comes in, takes over when they're refusing to produce, and then hands the actual factory over to the workers, and magically it starts running again. The inventory is still there to produce all the things that they need. And the fact that, and you can look this up because it's very, very easy to find if you're honest enough to actually look, is to find the instances where certain commodities are being hoarded and hidden in order to damage the market, in order to damage the economy in general. But these completely unethical pieces of shit behind film theory didn't bother researching one thing at all. Second, now when they talked about the oil price crashing, this greatly harming the Venezuelan economy. Yes, that is true. That did hurt. Well, if you are a one commodity economy like oil, as is Venezuela, you're going to suffer big time when the price goes down. Of course, what they completely failed to mention, because again, they don't know what they're talking about, is the fact that all of the oil producing countries, the ones who just happen to be allied to the U.S., started overproducing oil in order to create a glut so that the price would go down. And this coincided with U.S. sanctions against Venezuela. And this just happened to coincide with aggressions against Russia, who also suffered a fair deal from it. Not as bad as Venezuela, but they did suffer to some degree. But of course, they completely left this piece of context out. The price of oil just went down all of a sudden. Perfectly politically timed, and then right back up, perfectly politically timed. Because they don't know what they're talking about. And then another thing that they completely just pretend doesn't exist is the role of the sanctions in hurting the country. They didn't even bother mentioning that. It's not even there. So what you have is a country with a great deal of economic power, like the United States, deliberately sabotaging the economy of a smaller, weaker country like Venezuela. But you don't think that might have something to do with the economic troubles that Venezuela has? You don't think maybe that's worth mentioning? As maybe just a little caveat, a little detour here. It always fills me with facepalm when you hear people say things like, oh, well, the sanctions don't do that much. Well, the sanctions don't really do any damage. I call it Schrodinger's sanctions. The sanctions are deliberately designed to harm the economy, but at the same time, they don't harm the economy and don't have any effect whatsoever. I mean, that's literally the goddamn point of sanctions. I mean, they even say it when they're creating them and codifying them into law. That the point is to harm the economy, to try to sway their position away from the one that the U.S. doesn't like. But at the same time, as soon as you mention the impact that the sanctions have on the country, they just say, oh, well, the sanctions don't do any damage. You know, as I said, Schrodinger's sanctions. Now, they, in an astounding moment, they just said, they declared that Venezuelan people eat out of the garbage. That's how poor they are. First of all, yeah, you're going to need to show a fucking source for that one. To just claim that the population of Venezuela eats out of the garbage? Yeah, I'm going to have to tell you to shut the fuck up on that one, because you are an outright lying piece of shit. Sorry for the unusually harsh use of language, but these guys are complete assholes, and they really do deserve it. Now, they also made some certain claims about the Soviet Union, like the Soviet Union just privately sold off their gas reserves, and then all of a sudden, people just got poor. Like, they're not even specific about what happened. They just completely made up this whole thing about a massive private sell-off. Well, I suppose this kind of would have happened at the end of the Soviet Union. I kind of researched it and couldn't really find out what the hell the guy was talking about, claiming that there was a massive privatization during the Soviet Union. I know that happened after the Soviet Union. It's kind of the whole point of abolishing the Soviet Union to begin with. But I can't really directly challenge his claim because I can't figure out what the fuck he's talking about. And another thing that he says about how, command economies don't know what people need. As long as we just, ignore the history of command economies. First of all, the Soviet Union pretty much knew what people needed and what the country needed by the huge industrialization program that took place under the Feldman model. That would be the economic model that was developed for the industrialization of the economy. But of course, none of that really matters when you can just make a blanket statement, oh, Soviet Union didn't know nothing, so therefore they didn't do nothing. We should just probably ignore the economic successes of the Soviet Union, which just went completely unnoticed by the person making the video. Well, we could also mention the command economy of China. Even though it isn't actually socialist, it's still largely a command economy, which has done astronomically well in the last 20 years, and even particularly in the last 5 years, since the global recession of capitalism in 2008. It's done remarkably well since then and is poised to take over the world in economic power. Perhaps he would care to explain that one. Oh wait, he can't, because he'd have to know what the fuck he's talking about. And just to put one final piece, just one final thing on the video, he describes the Wakanada economy, that being the one from Black Panther, as being ruled by a rich elite that controls everything. I don't think you know this, but that's literally capitalism, you stupid asshole.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.